she was talking to one of her friends and she mentioned the word me ma, me pa, and I was like, this sounds a bit Jamaican.
There's a saying here in Jamaica, we're little but we're talawa, and I think that applies equally both to Ireland and Jamaica.
About 70 million people worldwide claim Irish ancestry, so it's a big and complex story.
Growing up in Jamaica, you know, people would always comment on my appearance. So
when they see me and hear me, the only thing they can assume is Irish.
But you do speak with a Jamaican accent.
I do.
This particular album is like a dedication to the reggae music from an Irish perspective.
Maybe it's because I'm Irish that I find the humour and like the kind of personality type of Irish and Jamaicans to be really, really similar.
Very like upbeat, happy people.
Well, the positivity vibe.
Massive positivity, yeah.
Guinness was from Ireland. I always thought Guinness was from Jamaica until I came to Ireland. Yes.
My name is Irina. I'm originally from Ukraine, but I'm also a Jamaican resident. Jamaica has been my home for 9 years now. For this episode, I've been fortunate to find 9 people who helped me with this project. I'm so grateful to them for finding the time for the interviews and for sharing their experience and knowledge. I would also like to give special thanks to APIC, the Irish Emigration Museum in Dublin, that helped me a lot with understanding the parts of the very complex Irish history in the Caribbean. Thank you, and let's start. This video is sponsored by you. Thank you so much for the support.
The history of Jamaican people is closely linked to the people of Ireland, so much so that about 25% of all modern-day Jamaicans can claim Irish ancestry. In fact, the Irish people are the second largest reported ethnic group in Jamaica after the Jamaicans of African ancestry. Of all European ethnic groups, it's actually not English, but Irish culture that had the most influence on Jamaica. And you can see it from something general, like the Jamaican accent that was heavily influenced by the Irish, to something more specific, like an Irish flute in Jonkanu Band. So we're here today in the heart of Dublin in Ireland, and I would like to share the story with you about the people of these two islands, Jamaica and Ireland.
Ireland is the third largest island in Europe. It's called the Emerald Isle because of its beautiful countryside that remains green throughout the year, often even in winter. The island is largely flat with low central plains surrounded by 12 small mountain ranges, mostly in the western coast of the island, with the highest peak over 1,000 meters. Ireland is famous for its magnificent cliffs, fresh air, narrow roads, and breathtaking scenery, like from a fantasy book, with numerous medieval castles and churches and ancient tombs. When it comes to political geography, this is where things get rather complicated. There is an independent country, the Republic of Ireland, which takes up 84% of the landmass, and the rest is Northern Ireland, and there are still discussions how to refer to Northern Ireland. Some call it a province, a region or constituent country, but the main point, Northern Ireland is a part of the UK where the British monarch is recognised as a head of state, while the Republic of Ireland is a republic which has an elected president and the head of the government is Taoiseach.
It's Taoiseach,
which is an Irish term for a prime minister, literally meaning chief. Historically, Ireland was also kind of split into 4 provinces: Connacht, Leinster, Munster and Ulster. Northern Ireland is often referred to as Ulster because it encompasses most of the counties that make up the historical province. Sometimes people in Britain refer to this whole area as the British Isles, insisting it's a geographical term. Many people in Ireland reject this name as an outdated colonial term because Ireland is neither Britain nor British. The Northern Ireland is a part of the UK, but not a part of Britain. The Republic of Ireland was among the very first in the 20th century to gain independence from Britain, and unlike most former British colonies, Ireland is not a member of the Commonwealth of Nations, which used to be called the British Commonwealth. You know, the 56 member states? Ireland is not there. Currently, there are only about 7 million people living on the entire island, with just over 5 million in the Republic of Ireland, making it one of the least populated countries in Europe. The largest cities are Dublin, which is the capital of the Republic. There are also Cork, Limerick and Galway, and in the Northern Ireland, the capital Belfast and the town of Derry.
My name is Steve Royce Steer. I'm from Woodstock, Claremont in the parish of St. Ann, Jamaica, and I've been residing in Ireland for the past 20 years. I'm currently practicing as a solicitor. I arrived here after secondary school in Jamaica, so I do all my studies, go through college, law school here, qualify as a solicitor in 2017, work in a small practice in Dublin before setting up my own practice in 2021.
But why Ireland? Why not Jamaica?
I didn't choose Ireland actually. Two of my aunts was here in Ireland before they arrived here in 99 and 2000 on the Joyce program from Jamaica. So after I finished secondary school, I wanted to move on to college. But as you know, in Jamaica, it's very expensive to go to college, and there's no way I would be able to afford it. My parents would be able to afford it in Jamaica. So I decided that I will join my aunts in Ireland to do my studies there.
So Irish college was cheaper than the Jamaican one?
Well, it's not more so of whether it's cheaper. Well, first of all, I'm from St. Ann, which is in the country area. So, it would be more difficult for me to say, for example, go to a college and to be able to do a part-time job. There's more opportunities here. So for example, the moment I arrived in Ireland, I realized straight away I would be able to continue my studies and also work part-time, and that's actually how I found my college. I work, save, and throw partners and borrow loans, and that's how I actually found my college.
Can you tell me more about this Joyce program?
I didn't arrive on the Joyce program, but my aunts did. It's a program where a student would arrive from Jamaica. They would be studying in Jamaica in colleges, and they have this program which they can travel to various countries, and they would travel to Ireland on the Joyce program as part of their studies. Some of the students actually return home, and some of them decided to remain and, after their studies, carry on with their life, careers, and build families. I think that's the route that actually brought a lot of Jamaicans here to Ireland. Well, for me, it was much easier in that when I arrived here, I already have family here. So in terms of getting into college, getting part-time jobs, it was more easier. So, for example, for a Jamaican who, say, arrive in Ireland and have no connection, no base here, it might be more difficult for them. But for me, I was fortunate to have family members here.
My name is Marisia. I am from Jamaica, and I am now living in Ireland for the last 23 years. I work as a dispensing optician. Our company have 3 practices in Dublin and 1 in Kildare. I work between the 3 practices.
How did you get to Ireland? How did that happen?
So basically, I was reading Sidney Sheldon book, and I don't remember which one of them, and I was reading about Dublin, something about Dublin, and then I thought, I'm gonna go there. And when the Joyce program came up, I chose Ireland because they speak English, and I thought, I don't know anyone there, so I'm going to try it out.
I don't know if there are many Jamaicans in Ireland, are there?
Not that many. Probably overall, maybe around 500 around Ireland.
Do you go to Jamaica quite often?
Usually, but I was there last year. Unfortunately, my brother passed away last year. Before COVID usually every year. I'm from St. Catherine, but my husband is from Montego Bay, so yeah, I usually hang around St. James mostly and to visit the family in Geisel, St. Catherine. Yeah.
So your husband is also Jamaican, is he?
Yes, he is.
So, but did you meet him in Ireland?
No, we met in Jamaica in college in Northern Caribbean University.
So when you decided to move to Ireland, what did your husband think about it?
You know, men, they just follow the women. I don't think he thought about it at the time.
When I made a decision to go to Jamaica, I told my husband, okay, I'm going to Jamaica. Are you coming with me or are you staying? He had no choice, really. So did you have a similar situation?
Similar, but he decided that he wanted to come. I didn't force him.
All right.
There is a Jamaican diaspora, and as I should mention from the beginning, I'm the chairman of the Jamaican and Ireland diaspora. It's a small community here, and one of the reasons why we have a small community here is that a lot of Jamaicans would live in Ireland for years, but after a while they would decided to migrate to the UK.
Also, why?
Well, I think, first of all, living in the UK, it's bringing you more closer to home. So in terms of, you know, the culture, the food, the connection, the cost of traveling to Jamaica is much, much more cheaper from the UK. So, for example, if you're living in the UK, you might not miss that much about Jamaica in terms of food and all of that, whereas in Ireland it's very difficult to source Jamaican products. So even for my own family, a lot of my family members, you know, migrated to the UK after living in Ireland for years. So a lot of Jamaicans actually do. There is a greater connection to Jamaica from the UK, and the diaspora there is much larger as well. So it's a much smaller community here, but we are in contact with the diaspora in the UK from the point of view of the Jamaican High Commissioner in London would be our representative here on the ground.
Oh.
Yes, would be our non-resident ambassador. Now we also have an honorary consul here, Mr. Barry O'Brien, who resides here in Ireland. He actually lived in Jamaica for years and was one of the CEO of Digicel as well. So he's here on the ground, but we also have the representative in London.
Most Jamaicans here would come for work. Like myself, when I came here, I had a job already.
I thought you came through this program.
I did, yeah, but I got a job. It was a student program, but like that, you don't come and sit idle. You would have a job when you arrive. So now, it's like we're back. History is repeating itself. There's a shortage of labor in Ireland. So now their agency bring in Jamaicans here. But usually, Jamaicans don't think about Ireland that much, if you know what I mean. Until someone mention, oh, would you like to work here or would you like to go to Ireland? Then yeah, because before I came to Ireland, when I was reading the book, that's when I thought Dublin. Never heard of Dublin before, and I thought, where is that? Where is that? And then yeah, after enrolling into college, then the Joyce program came along and I was like, I'm gonna go to Dublin.
My name is Catherine Healy. I'm historian in residence here at EPIC, the Irish Emigration Museum, and I'm from Ireland myself, Dublin raised, and have seen many of my own friends emigrate in the last few years and have a long family history of emigration too. We were opened in 2016 and we tell the story of Irish emigration over the last 4 centuries. And we look at the reasons why people left. The Great Famine is a big theme. And we look at the influence that Irish people had in the places where they settled. About 70 million people worldwide claim Irish ancestry. So it's a big and complex story.
So these are your EPIC passports. It's like a map of the museum as well. It starts in Gallery 1 next door, just there, and then there's 20 galleries, and in each room there's one of these stampers. You just slide your passport through, follow the arrows, and give it a little stamp.
We all come from
The founder of the museum is a man called Neville Isdale, who's a former chairperson of Coca-Cola Company. He was an Irish emigrant himself, born in County Down in Northern Ireland. And then the museum was built with the help of a very large research team comprising historians from Ireland and further afield. So it was a project that was many years in the works. And the content is continually updated. One of the benefits of being a digital museum is that we can refresh the stories that are being told and update panels based on new evidence, new research. Any Caribbean visitor, whether they have Irish heritage or not, should come to visit us here at EPIC, the Irish Emigration Museum, and see how our diaspora has shaped societies across the world, including Caribbean societies. And we'll have a new exhibition opening at the start of September, which will tell that story, looking at Irish migration from the 1700s and looking at the influence that Irish settlers had across a range of sectors, from education to journalism to Caribbean writers who were influenced by Irish literature and vice versa. So it's an undertold story, I think, and a really interesting and diverse one, which I think people will gain a lot from.
Is Ireland similar to England?
I think we are quite culturally distinct and have always been, but there's about 8 centuries of British colonial history in this country. We started off with the Anglo-Norman invasion, 1169. That was the first encroachment into Irish territory. And then, you know, fast forward to 16th and 17th century, you have the British plantations of Ireland, where a significant number of English and Scottish settlers are brought over to take over confiscated land. And there was a nationalist movement then that really took hold in the late 19th century. You have numerous conflicts culminating in the Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921, which gives Ireland self-government, and we leave the Commonwealth and become a republic then in 1949.
Has Ireland ever colonised any other countries?
No, Ireland has not ruled any country in that sense, but the Irish have been an important presence within the British colonial system. A lot of wealthier Irish in particular served as part of the civil service in India, in Africa. Many of them were governors in different British territories. And that's a part of Irish history that's often overlooked. There's this narrative that we were oppressed throughout time, but the real story is a bit more complicated than that.
Largest island in the Caribbean, and because of its perfect tropical climate and gorgeous beaches, Jamaica is often perceived as a holiday destination. So many people are unaware that it's actually a very mountainous country, with the highest peak 2.2 kilometers. Not only that, but Jamaican Blue Mountains is the only place in the world where you can find rainforests at such high elevation. Because of this combination of mountains and tropical climate, Jamaica is full of rivers, and there are about 100 waterfalls, even though less than 10 are usually visited by tourists. There is also a drier area in the south of Jamaica, with savanna, cacti, marshland and crocodiles, that looks completely different from everything else in Jamaica. With all this beauty, of course, tourism is the biggest industry in Jamaica. However, because of this tourism image, people often forget how much more there is to Jamaica in terms of culture, history, science, and the impact Jamaica has on other countries. I'm very passionate about Jamaica, and I can talk about it for hours. And I do. This channel is dedicated to Jamaica. So please check the playlists. You know, we cover a wide range of topics. But here I'd like to mention a few more points that are particularly relevant to this episode. The population of Jamaica today is almost 3 million people. But there are another 3 million Jamaicans who live outside of Jamaica, making Jamaica a country with some of the highest number of immigrants in the world as a percentage of their population. So just like in Ireland, immigration is a big topic in Jamaica. In 1962, Jamaica gained independence from Britain after being a colony for 307 years. Jamaica is still a constitutional monarchy and a British monarch is recognized as a head of state. But the discussions about becoming a republic have been going on for quite some time now. Jamaica is divided into 14 parishes. Kingston is the capital of Jamaica, and it is about the same size as Dublin. The other big cities in Jamaica include Spanish Town and Portmore, while the towns that are most popular with tourists are in the north coast of the island. These are Montego Bay, Ocho Rios and Negril.
My name is Ciara Jones, I'm 24, I'm from Dublin, Ireland, and I've been in Jamaica for 2 years, living in Jamaica for 2 years.
Why did you choose Jamaica?
I was working in Ireland during COVID when everything was a different world than it is now anyway. And I got the opportunity to come out to Jamaica for a 5-month internship. So I took it without looking back. I just said yes. Came out for 5 months thinking I was going to dread every day. And then here I am 2 years later, still here.
Do you have an option to extend internship or how does that work?
Well, I got offered a full-time job from that. Well, actually, I got offered a full-time job and then a grad program. So now I have the opportunity to stay on, but it's kind of coming to terms for me just wanting to be back closer to my family. So my time is very sadly coming to an end.
My name is James Watson. I'm 24 years old and I've been living in Jamaica for about a year and a half. I'm from Dublin, Ireland.
So what do you like about Jamaica?
What's not to like about Jamaica? Well, coming from Ireland, particularly the weather. Yeah, you can't beat the sunshine for the most part. And then I suppose definitely the culture, the people, it definitely makes it. I had an opportunity to do an internship last summer and I don't know, I spent my 2 to 3 months here and I got the opportunity to come back and yeah, I jumped at it.
Why Jamaica? Why didn't you go to do internship elsewhere?
I wanted something different. A lot of my friends, they do, I don't know, J1 in America. It's very kind of what everyone does, but when I saw this was very different and a unique opportunity to come up to, of all places, Jamaica, I really sought after it.
Dublin's a very small place and if you kind of hear or see of someone going to Jamaica, something that you definitely remember, so I kind of remembered that and then when I kind of saw the opportunity I took it.
Yeah, but why Jamaica? Why not Bahamas?
Well, kind of at the point that I was at in Ireland I would have gone anywhere, so if someone had said do you want to go to India I would have said yes. And I didn't know anything about Jamaica before coming. I had no idea what it was going to be like. I think I didn't actually even really look into it, I don't think, very much. And then whatever I did see online is not what I saw in real life here. It's a completely different place than is advertised online.
Oh, really? How different?
Well, I don't think the internet's too kind. If you look up traveling to Jamaica, there's all these different rules, regulations, guidelines on how to be safe in Jamaica. And then when I came out here, in my 2 years, I don't think I've ever kind of felt unsafe.
Have you been to many places around Kingston? And
yeah. Been to places like downtown Kingston, like, I don't know where you're not allowed to go, but I feel like I've gone everywhere.
What surprised you in the best way about Jamaica?
So I hear Jamaica and I think Caribbean island. I think Caribbean and I think island. So I'm kind of only seeing beaches and people in like swimming shorts or whatever. So then when I kind of realised that there's an actual city, I think I didn't really think about that part. But yeah, there's a city here and it's very busy and the traffic is really, really bad. So it's not just a beach town that I'd kind of imagined.
Mm-hmm. What about the nature? What about the mountains?
I didn't realise there was I always thought Ireland was very, very green until I came to Jamaica and realised Ireland is called the green country, but it's nothing in comparison to Jamaica. Jamaica is greenery everywhere. It's such a green country. And then I love the idea of the mountains, which I'm looking at. The mountains being like the full centre of the island and then surrounded just by beaches.
What about the waterfalls? Have you been to different waterfalls?
I went on kind of like a little bit of a hunt that I wanted to take off all the waterfalls. So I presume there's probably like a few little small ones that I haven't done, but any of the big ones I've done. I love the waterfalls.
My name is Brian Denning. I'm the Honorary Consul for Ireland to Jamaica. I was born in Drogheda in County Louth and grew up in Sligo town. I've been 24 years in Jamaica to date.
Why Jamaica?
Well, after I had trained as a chartered accountant, an opportunity came up to be seconded to Jamaica in the mid-90s, and I grasped that opportunity. I was here for 2 years. My job took me back to Ireland, and then I came back out in 2001. So in total, I've been here for 24 years. And I also met my wife, Kay Anthis, who's from Ocherias. So she's also a big reason why I came back out.
Okay, I see. Well, that's brilliant. But why originally you decided to come to Jamaica and not to some other country?
Well, the opportunity presented in the area I was working in, I specialised in taxation. There wouldn't have been that many opportunities in other jurisdictions. So there was a connection established between the Irish firm of PwC and the Jamaican firm of PwC. The head of the tax practice in each firm had gotten to know one another, and they reached out looking for some assistance. And so that opportunity presented itself, and that's how I came first to Jamaica.
Have you always wanted to live in the Caribbean?
No, I didn't know that much about the Caribbean before I first came here. I would have known a limited amount, but the opportunity to come to the tropics and just get a different experience outside of Ireland, very different weather, and it was a good opportunity to take up.
Is the Irish community quite big in Jamaica?
We don't have a direct handle on the exact number. I would say it's probably between 300 and 500. The Irish community here is pretty well self-sufficient, so they only tend to come to us when they're in need of something. But they're well established, and they contribute in a wide variety of ways to the Jamaican economy and Jamaican way of life, whether it's in business, academia, sports, culture, entertainment. So they're dotted all across the island.
I had the impression that most Irish people here are from basically work in Digicel. That's the impression I got.
There is certainly a concentration of Irish people who still would be working in Digicel. Digicel was a firm, a telecoms firm established by Dennis O'Brien from Ireland. But notwithstanding that, there are actually a much wider range of Irish across the island who have come in various waves over the decades and have settled and different parts of the island for different reasons.
Did you have any certain expectations about Jamaica?
I had zero expectations, absolutely none. I really didn't know what I was going to be experiencing over here. But I think that's actually what's made it for me, because anything I looked up online, when I arrived, none of it really mattered or made sense. You really have to kind of make your own experiences out here, and the reality's been fantastic, but yeah, no expectations.
You surely heard of Jamaica before coming here.
Yes, I've of course heard of Jamaica, but the only thing I'd really heard of before coming here was the movie Cool Runnings. I watched that obviously with the bobsled team. There's the whole Rastafarian community, that's obviously very well known, and Bob Marley. They would have been the kind of main staples of Jamaica that I would have associated it with. Other than that, no, didn't know anything. I didn't know where I'd be living, or as you said, the mountains, didn't know the Blue Mountains were a real place. So as time went on and to see how much there was here, how much there was to do here, it really made it, yeah.
So, Kingston has this reputation as a dangerous city.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there's definitely aspects of it that's true, but I've been fortunate enough not to encounter
any stuff. And you don't just stay in just gated communities, you go out.
Definitely go out. I definitely not really kind of held back in going places or not going places based on fear.
I think maybe there's a false representation across, I don't know, well in Ireland anyway, anyone I would have said I was moving to Jamaica, and all the parents would have been I don't know, potentially a bit worried, or well, my mom anyway. But I think for the most part, Jamaica is a very safe place. and they're very, very hospitable and welcoming to the Irish. Yeah. Well, that's my experience anyway.
Okay. I know you are an honorary consul. Why this role?
So the Irish government approached me in 2016 and asked me to take on this role. From a work perspective, I'm a partner in PwC and I run the tax practice for Jamaica and also have oversight responsibility across the CARICOM region. And they often reach out to persons who are well established in jurisdictions to act for the interests of the Irish community. It's an honour to serve Ireland and to look out for my fellow Irish and also to serve Jamaicans who are interested in going to visit, work or study in Ireland.
What kind of work the honorary consulate does?
So it ranges from the fairly routine, dealing with inquiries both from Irish people regarding citizenship, passport inquiries, etc., and Jamaicans who require visas to come to Ireland, as well as the non-routine when people have certain incidents occur, to try to deal with them in terms of various consular cases. That is, to me, the great part of the job, serving people when sometimes they're in their greatest need and they're most vulnerable. So it's great to have somebody that they feel they can trust and on the ground to be able to help them out in sometimes a very difficult situation. I see my role both serving Jamaicans interested in Ireland, as well as Irish people coming out and connecting with Jamaica, and also from a trade perspective to enhance the bilateral links between Jamaica and Ireland for both Jamaican businesses looking to expand into Ireland and also the European Union, as well as Irish companies looking to come into Jamaica and the Caribbean and using Jamaica as a hub into the wider CARICOM region.
While doing the research for this episode, I've noticed that a lot of sources mention that Jamaica and Ireland have a strong connection and many things in common, like place names, surnames, something to do with language, and full stop. As soon as you try to find some actual examples or history behind them, you get these lots of things in common without specifying what they are. But of course, for this video, I wanted to look into the details and make sure they're accurate and find out what this connection between Ireland and Jamaica actually is, including the past, the present, and the historical links in between. The Spanish were the first who colonized the Caribbean, and Jamaica was not an exception. It spent 161 years as a Spanish colony. During this time, almost all indigenous Taino population was either killed, died of diseases, or became assimilated. So when the English came to take over Jamaica in May 1655 and the Spanish fled the island, the population of Jamaica was very small, estimated only around 1,500 people, mostly Africans. These Africans became known as the Maroons, and they were the earliest free black people in the Caribbean. The large parts of the center of Jamaica had never been captured by the British. These were the self-run lands of the Maroons, officially recognized as such by the British in the 18th century. And this land still belongs to the Maroons today. It's like kind of a small autonomy within Jamaica. The colonization of the Caribbean by the English began not with Jamaica, but with their first settlement in St. Kitts from 1620s, and then they took over Barbados, Montserrat, Antigua, and Nevis. At that time, the transatlantic slave trade had not reached the scale that was yet to follow from the 1700s. So a lot of the very first laborers who were brought to the Caribbean by the English in the 1600s were the Irish.
So the early West Indies plantations did have a significant number of Irish indentured labourers. The Irish were actually the largest stream of white migrants to the Caribbean in that period. In Barbados and in St. Kitts, for example, they work alongside enslaved people in sugar plantations. And that continues then when the British take Jamaica in the 1650s.
I could find that Irish were first moved outside of Ireland forcefully, so it wasn't like a voluntary migration. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a mix really. Certainly a lot of it was forced. You have people whose lands were confiscated by the Cromwellian regime. You have political prisoners being transported out to the West Indies to fill the demand for labour. But then you do have a significant number who willingly entered into contracts of indentured labour and made that choice to go over and work, and many also going over in the hopes of making a fortune for themselves. As early as the 17th century, the Irish planters and merchants who began to make their presence felt.
Just to be clear on the definitions, what is the difference between slavery and indentured servitude?
So an indentured servant was typically someone who entered into a contract with definite end date, up to 10 years, for example, after which they were free to do as they pleased. And that was usually in exchange for passage and food and accommodation and so on. And often there was a plot of land provided to them then at the end of that contract. Whereas obviously slavery is a very different system, no hope of any sort of freedom in life. And yeah, those two categories have been collapsed for political reasons in the last few years. Particularly the alt-right in the US have latched on to this notion that the Irish were slaves too, as a way to undermine the very legitimate anger still felt over the enduring legacy of transatlantic slavery. That's not to undermine the suffering of Irish migrants. They were terribly treated, and the English did regard them as white slaves. They use that language if you look at records from the period, but there's a very clear legal difference. They had legal rights that enslaved people did not and could never hope to have.
To understand what really happened, we need to look back a little more to the 1500s. While Spain still ruled Jamaica, there were huge changes happening to Christianity in Europe. The Protestant Reformation that began with Martin Luther in 1517. Before 1500s, the Scots and the Irish had a sense of common purpose, fighting against the domination of the English. However, then, England and Scotland both underwent the Reformation, and by 1600s, these societies became of predominantly Protestant faith, unlike the Irish society, which remained largely Catholic. That was one of the reasons why the Irish were often treated by the English as lesser people, not only because of the wars over land, resources, domination of the English in Ireland, but also the average Irish were of their own faith. This became even more relevant when Oliver Cromwell came to power, and this was the time when Jamaica was colonized by the English, or more specifically by the Cromwellian forces.
Cromwell, I suppose, is best known here in this country for his spearheading of the Ulster plantation, and that comes on the back of the 1601 Battle of Kinsale, where you have Spanish forces coming in and working with two Gaelic lords based in Ulster. Those two Gaelic lords eventually flee the country, but there's a lot of concern among the English establishment at that time over the growing unruliness of the Gaelic lords in Ulster, and the Ulster plantation is partly a result of that. And you see massive swathes of land being taken over and being given over mostly to English and Scottish settlers of the Protestant faith. And Cromwell was stridently anti-Catholic, despised all tenets of the religion, and that was largely the motivating factor for the Ulster plantation, was to eradicate the Catholic faith and to reduce the influence of Catholic landholders. A significant number of Irish migrants to Jamaica and the West Indies more generally were people who were dispossessed as a result of the Cromwellian regime, but it's hard to pin down exactly how many of them were as a result of that particular time in Irish history. Another problem is that a lot of the Irish who are sent over are recorded as English, and so it's very hard to get reliable statistics on the numbers leaving Ireland and going to places like Jamaica as a result.
One of the sources that I used for this episode is an academic research on the history of the Irish in the Caribbean published by Sir Hilary Beckles, who is from Barbados originally. He's a Caribbean historian, among many other accomplishments, and I didn't have a chance to interview him, but one of his works I'd like to quote here. It's available online. The link is in the description. So the evidence we do have is that in 1600s, the number of European settlers in the English West Indies was higher than the number of Africans, or about the same. Here we can see the estimated numbers for the population and the sources where these numbers come from. So in Barbados, for example, there were about 23,000 Europeans and 20,000 Africans, while in the Leeward Islands this ratio was 8,000 to only 2,000. The Jamaican records didn't include the number for the Maroons, so we see 3,000 specified as white and 500 black. But then the rapid increase in the number of African population is apparent, especially in Jamaica from 1690s. We also have the census of the Leeward Islands, where we can find the breakdown of some reported ethnic groups, and the Irish were a large group of people in all of them. What's interesting here is that in Montserrat, over 50% of all their population was Irish, and even today Montserrat is the most Irish-influenced nation of the Caribbean. They even celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Another source that I used for this video is the academic work by Dr. Rogers. She's a researcher and historian at Queen's University in Belfast, and she did an extensive work on the Irish in the Caribbean covering that period. She mentions quite a few interesting points. After the conquest of Jamaica in 1655, Henry Cromwell offered to help populate the island by sending off 1,000 young women, a move for their own good, although we must use force in taking them up. A similar number of boys, aged from 12 to 14, could also be provided. However, whether or not this deportation took place remains uncertain. Its funding proved elusive. So there is actually no evidence that 1,000 women and boys were sent to Jamaica, but we do have the evidence of the other Irish people. By the time Jamaica became an English colony, the trade with Irish servants had already been established for many years, and some Irish servants were transferred from Barbados and other English West Indies to be used as labour in Jamaica. And this in turn caused a decline of the Irish population in the Leeward Islands. In fact, Jamaica was the only place that experienced an increase in the Irish population during the last quarter of the 17th century, because Jamaica was advertised as a place with religious tolerance and an easy access to land ownership. So endangered servants from Ireland, as well as Irish freemen from Barbados and the Leewards, responded to these incentives during this period of time. The English were not much on the plantations, but the Africans and the Irish were, and those people had to coexist. The Africans were deliberately mixed, so they had no common language, and they didn't speak English. But the language they were regularly exposed to was the one that the Irish used, which was mostly the Irish form of English language. They had to communicate and interact, and of course, some of those people formed relationships. The Irish interracial marriages and affairs, both voluntary and involuntary, is an area of life which doesn't usually get much documented. But we do have some written records in form of private letters from the 17th and 18th centuries, which mention such relationships as something common. So the reason why the Irish DNA is so widely present in modern-day Jamaican population is partly because of the very first 50 years of Jamaican history under the English rule. You might think, well, it's only like 50 years, but it's actually a lot. It's 2 generations. And it was at the very start of the English colonization. So there would be children who were half Irish, half African, and then their descendants would continue forming relationships with more Africans who were brought to Jamaica as enslaved people later. So today you might see people who look 100% African and might not even realize they have Irish DNA because of their great-great-great-great-grandfather from the 1600s. Sometimes Jamaicans of Irish origins might look like Europeans and might not realize they are of African descent as well. The people from India came to Jamaica much later, and even though their diaspora is rather big in Jamaica today, they didn't have these hundreds of years in Jamaica to form relationships like the descendants of the Irish did. And that's why the Indian DNA is not as widely spread in Jamaican population as the Irish. And we shouldn't forget that there was another wave of Irish migration to Jamaica in the 19th century once the slavery had been abolished.
Hi, nice meeting you, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's nice meeting you as well. I'm Kemora Pitter. I'm 23 years old, recently completed my degree in marketing from the University of the West Indies. Both of my parents are from Kingston. However, my grandfather was from St. Elizabeth and he was of European descent. It's uncertain whether it was Irish or Scottish. Growing up in Jamaica, you know, people would always comment on my appearance, so, you know, that kind of made me aware that, you know, there was something different about me. So, you know, at some point my mom, she decided to tell me a little about her family, and, you know, that's where I found out from her that, you know, my grandfather's father was allegedly from Ireland, so that's my great-grandfather.
Okay. What was his last name?
Dunn.
Or is it like Dunn's River?
Yes, Dunn, D-U-N-N, Dunn.
Have you ever thought of doing a DNA test?
Yes, I've thought of doing a DNA test, however, I've never gotten the opportunity to do it because it's not available in Jamaica at the moment. So doing the genealogical research, I've discovered that, you know, I actually come from a long line of Euro-Jamaicans in St. Elizabeth, and the furthest one I can trace it back to was in Westmoreland.
Have you got any relatives in Europe that you know of?
Oh, no, honestly, no. I don't have any that I know of.
What about your parents? What did they tell you about that?
Okay, well, my mother, she told me, she just told me that our great-grandfather was from Ireland. So apart from that, nothing more. You know, it's a long-lost connection. You know, that's from centuries ago. So my background in Jamaica, my Euro background, it actually tend to have been much extended than I thought, because through further research, I later found out that it's actually from the 18th century back, like even further than that. So it's not actually my great-grandfather coming to Jamaica, but it's way back. So, you know, it's really hard to figure out if I have any relatives in Europe.
Kemar's family can be traced back to the 1700s in Jamaica, which means he's a descendant of some of the earliest Europeans and Africans who lived on the island. There are also Jamaicans of Irish descent whose family moved here a bit later, in the 19th century, and been around for like 150 years.
All right, I'm Jamie Salter. I'm from Kingston, Jamaica, and I do construction management.
You have some Irish background.
I do.
So can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Well, my grandmother on my mother's side was from Ireland. I believe she was born in Arklow, and she came down here with my grandfather from England, who was studying overseas for medicine when he was there.
Have you ever been to Ireland?
I went to Ireland once when I was probably about 8 or 9. The only thing I can remember about Ireland was Blarney Castle. My parents took me to Blarney Castle, and I got to kiss the Blarney Stone at a very young age. So,
how did you learn about your Irish background?
Well, I mean, I've always known on my mother's side because my mother has family in Ireland. My grandfather was a doctor that worked with the English government. So he was stationed in Ireland, and then he was brought back to Jamaica. So my mom actually grew up in Ireland for a few years. So she knew her family over there firsthand. It wasn't like one of those things where, you know, you've moved, one part of your family has moved to another country, and then over the years you kind of lose touch. That's not the case. We actually know our family over there firsthand.
Okay, but why did she choose to come back to Jamaica?
Well, I guess she was married to my grandfather. Are you speaking about my mother or my grandmother?
Your grandmother?
My grandmother, well, what happened was he was over there in the war during World War II, and he was in England and the bombs were dropping, and he's like, I'm not staying here. So he got transferred to Ireland, met her, and then he moved back to Jamaica. That's the story that I know.
Have you ever thought of relocating to Ireland to live there?
I did actually, but when I realized how much it would actually cost to actually pay for all of that on the hope that you get through, I was like, boy, €1,000, that's a bit of a gamble.
What €1,000?
Well, what it would have costed for me to go and get everything proven for my what would you call that, maternal lineage. So I would have had to approve that, and then the whole processing, and for them to actually decide whether or not they're going to give it to me, I would still have to pay that money.
Okay, I see, right.
So it's like, it's a bit of a gamble. I'm literally rolling the dice.
Right, and then you already live on an island that is green and beautiful. Why do you need another one?
Yeah, I'll be going from one emerald island to another. So only that one's a lot colder than this one.
Do you know when your relatives from Ireland came here? In 1800s?
Well, as I was telling you, my father's family is a bit of a mystery because my father's grandfather came to Jamaica from England, had a bunch of kids and left. And nobody really knew anything about his background. So from me knowing about all of my mom's background, I'm kind of piecing together what my dad is from my DNA test. My mom's family is mainly from Southern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. Where now I have DNA that shows up in Northern Ireland, in Belfast and Ulster and a couple of other places. So I'm assuming that that's coming from my father's side of the family.
Mm-hmm. But which years are we talking?
My grandmother would have come here, I would have assumed, in probably 1920, 1930, somewhere around there. And then on my father's side, my great-grandfather would have come here sometime, I would assume in the late 1800s, maybe 1860, 1870.
All right, so they come from there, basically they're from the later migrants of the Irish people, rather than the very
my family
first
are
ones.
not from the original
the
landowners of Jamaica.
Do you notice any Irish influence in Jamaica? When you walk around, do you think like, this looks like in Ireland or something like this? Do you have that?
Certainly, I think there are a number of different things that I see that definitely remind me of Ireland. There's quite a lot of place names in Ireland that you see here in Jamaica. Also street names. In fact, one of the ones that really for me stands out is off Mountain View Avenue, which is one of the roads coming in from the airport here in Kingston. And there are 4 roads, one after the other: Munster Road, Ulster Road, Sligo Road and Longford Road. There's 2 provinces and 2 counties in Ireland. We're here today on Kinsale Avenue. Again, Kinsale is a beautiful port town in Southern Ireland in Cork. In terms of products, a number of household names would be Guinness, Bailey's Irish Cream, Kerrygold Butter. You see a lot of those in the stores. There are a number of service companies that are working here in Jamaica and have established some Irish companies here. Caribbean Jobs would be one. VIP Airport Attractions is owned by an Irishman, David Hall. They run both VIP lounges in both international airports.
Is it the Mobay Club?
Mobay Club and Club Kingston, yes.
The connection between Ireland and Jamaica is not just going back from historic times, but also since the early 2000s when Digicel was established. You know, a lot of the CEOs from Digicel and a lot of Irish executives would go down to Jamaica and they would live there for a while and then they come back to Ireland. And sometimes when they do go down, they would basically bring their families with them. Digicel is a Jamaican company. Digicel was established in Jamaica back in 2001, and I believe Dennis O'Brien, who is the owner of Digicel, I believe, made the right choice. He couldn't choose a better location. So there's a lot of connection between Digicel and Ireland because obviously it's an Irish owner. Mr. Barry O'Brien, our honorary consul, he was one of the CEOs for Digicel, you know, for a while, and he's back here in Ireland. He's our honorary consul. Other executives for Digicel were Irish as well, and they live in Jamaica for a time with their families and come back. So there's a lot of connection between, you know, Ireland and Jamaica through Digicel.
Before Digicel, there was a monopoly for telecommunication services in the Caribbean, held by the company called Cable and Wireless. But because Digicel was launched with the base in Jamaica, we now have affordable prices for cable TV, mobile network and internet services. And by we, I don't mean just Jamaicans, it's all the people of the Caribbean and the Central America, and the same model was later applied in the Pacific. So basically, Digicel is a Jamaican company with headquarters in Kingston, and this company now operates in over 30 different markets worldwide, and all of it happened in just 20 years. There is another interesting company worth mentioning here related to sports management. Its founder is Ricky Sims, who's originally from Ireland. He's one of the leading sports agents in the world, so of course he's been an agent for the Jamaican star Usain Bolt, widely known as the greatest sprinter of all times.
When you go to Jamaica, do you ever notice we have the Irish potato in Jamaica?
Oh, yeah. I know we do, but I never paid
Why is
deep
it
attention.
called Irish?
I never think about it. I know a lot of Jamaicans love Irish potato, but and one thing I never know that Guinness was from Ireland. I always thought Guinness was from Jamaica until I came to Ireland. Yes.
The Guinness. So Jamaicans claim that Guinness here is delicious and it's the nicest of the Caribbean. The same as does every other island claims that their Guinness is the nicest of the Caribbean. But it's not Irish Guinness. Our Guinness tastes very, very different. So I've made it my mission that whenever I go back, I bring over cans of Guinness and I give it to like my Jamaican friends. I say, just try this and then tell me they're the same. So they've come back that they're not the same. The Constant Spring Golf Club, they have Guinness on tap. They do a proper Guinness.
Who? In Kingston, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
But it's like $12 for a pint. So it goes back to expensive.
Whoever wants to try real Irish Guinness in Jamaica, where do they go?
Constant Spring Golf Club, the brewery.
All right.
Very random.
All right.
If they like Guinness here, they'll love Guinness in Ireland, yeah.
But you know, Guinness here is, well, it's an Irish drink, but it's produced here locally.
It is produced here locally? I didn't know that because I actually thought it came from
Ireland?
From Nigeria.
Oh, from Nigeria.
That's where they have their second.
Really? You know that most Jamaicans think that Guinness is a Jamaican drink. They don't realize it's Irish.
They also believe the same with Baileys and the butter they have here.
Actually, this Guinness is Jamaican. The original name of this drink was West Indies Porter. It is a completely different drink from the one produced in Ireland. So in a way, it's not Irish, it's Jamaican, but with links to Ireland. You see, people like myself often assume that Guinness is a type of beer, but it's not. It's an Irish brand. Originally, there were 4 types of beer produced by Guinness. These ones. They were known as porter, the term used for dark and sweet beer, but none of them could make it to the Caribbean. They would spoil. So the 5th beer was introduced later, called West Indies Porter, which was brewed to be stronger, fortified with extra hops and a small amount of sour beer, and it could survive the long journey across the Atlantic. Later, the superior porter was renamed as Guinness Extra Stout, and West Indies Porter became Guinness Foreign Extra Stout. So this Guinness is a product of Jamaica. It's produced in Kingston by Jamaican company D&G. We also have another version here in Jamaica. It's called Guinness Smooth, and it's only 5% alcohol, whereas Guinness Foreign Extra Stout is 7.5% alcohol. So for all Jamaicans, when you go to Ireland, make sure to try Guinness there. And the Irish people, try Guinness in Jamaica, just without the expectations that it should taste like Guinness in Ireland. It doesn't. It's a different drink. And note how the story of Guinness is very different from, say, Baileys or Kerrygold butter, that are popular products in Jamaica imported from Ireland. There is another interesting drink we have here called Big Bamboo Jamaican Irish Moss drink. And it is actually Jamaican, not Irish. This drink is advertised as an energy drink in Jamaica, the kind that gives power, especially to men. And in case you wonder, there is no bamboo in this drink. But there are different flavors, like the vanilla flavor or strawberry. It's a sea moss drink, and the reason why this name is used is because the sea moss found in Jamaica is often referred to as Irish moss, because it's believed that it was the Irish in the 19th century who introduced using sea moss as food and drink in Jamaica.
Irish have been around for like a long time in Jamaica, so I feel every Jamaican has met an Irish person. But The one thing I find funny is they don't call it Ireland, which is what I would say. You have to say Ireland. So if you say Ireland, they think you're saying Orlando. So
oh, really? Interesting.
if someone asks me where are you from, I will say Ireland, which feels weird to say, but.
A lot of the time, most people think I'm from America. It's just straight off the bat, they'd assume I'm American or I am a tourist. And the look on their face when I tell them I'm not is quite funny.
But when they hear the way you speak, can they notice that you speak with an Irish accent?
No.
They don't realise it's an Irish accent?
No, they'd still think, because there'd be times where if I meet someone in a bar or whatever, you'd be like, oh, where do you think I'm from? And they'd always say America.
Oh, really? You know that Jamaican accent partially developed from the Irish accent? Have you heard of that?
I hadn't heard that before, but I would definitely believe it, yeah, just because I know a lot of the mannerisms, or definitely the humour from most Jamaicans it reminds me from back home, yeah.
My experience is like a lot of Irish who come here. They say to me, Brian, there's a real familiarity here when they come to Jamaica. Not the weather, but certainly in terms of the humour, the outlook. An Irish playwright, Brendan Behan, has said, and I can quote it, it's not that the Irish are cynical, but rather they have a wonderful lack of respect for everything and anybody. And that's said in a positive way. We don't get easily impressed by hype and celebrity. We tend to be very down to earth, very easygoing and so on. That was also expressed by a playwright, Sean O'Casey, who said, that's the Irish all over. They treat a joke as a serious thing and a serious thing as a joke. And you may be aware that in Jamaica, we have a very similar phrase, take serious thing, make joke. And that is a key part of how we interact with one another. And certainly I can speak in terms of being married to Kay. Humour is a very big part of our life and, you know, getting on, and we don't take things too seriously. And I think that keeps the relationship strong, you know. There are some words that there are similarity. You will know of Gansey, which is this Gaelic for sweater, for jumper. But in addition to that, the Irish musical lilt, the musical lilt of the accent is very similar. I think that certainly had helped me to learn to speak patois when I first came here, and it helped my ear tune into Jamaican patois much easier as a result.
A lot of words down here, the way Jamaicans speak, tree, things like that is all influenced by the Irish way of speaking. That's why when I was in university, everybody thought I was Irish.
Oh, really?
Because they could not place my accent.
But where at university?
When I was in the university in the United States.
Oh, I see.
They could not place my accent because they couldn't figure out my skin tone. My accent just didn't match because, as far as everybody knows, Jamaicans are all black. So
yeah, this is a common assumption.
When they see me and hear me, the only thing they can assume is Irish.
But you do speak with a Jamaican accent.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Do you also speak patois?
I do.
Yeah.
But it's you know, it's funny with Jamaicans and patois, at least for me. Because if somebody says to me, hey, say something in Jamaican, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, we speak English. But if you bring me in contact with a Jamaican, I immediately switch into patois.
Oh, really?
I don't even think about it.
Okay.
It's so more of a comfort zone almost.
Uh-huh.
That I know I'm amongst Jamaicans, so I speak like a Jamaican. When I'm not amongst Jamaicans, I speak in a way that you can understand me.
I read that Jamaican accent was heavily influenced by the Irish accent. Have you noticed any of the similarities, or?
Well, I do, and one of my first encounters was way back in 2003 when I arrived here first, and I was working as a part-time waiter in a restaurant. And I remember one of the waitresses came into the kitchen, and she was talking to one of her friends, and she mentioned the word "me ma." Me pa, and I was like, this sounds a bit Jamaican. You know, so there's a lot of similarities in terms of the way we talk, you know. They normally talk about Montserrat as having a similar accent as Cork, but there's also a lot of similarities with Jamaica as well in terms of the accent.
My name is Gary.
Gary, nice to meet you. Where are you from?
Nice to meet you. I'm from Cork City here, originally, yeah.
Do you think that Cork is the true capital of Ireland?
It's the rebel capital of the world, I think, yeah. It's just a fire in the belly, you know, you can't, you won't keep a Cork man down, you know.
What would you say the difference between a Cork man and a Dublin man is?
About 300 miles.
Do you think that Cork is the true capital of Ireland?
Oh, 1,000,000%, because we are just the best people. We're very friendly and everything. Yeah, that's what I think anyway. Like, I was up in Dublin now a few times, and when you're going around the place, Joe, there's more kind of like homeless people and all that, and then so everyone just kind of walks past them.
What's your favourite thing about Cork, or things about Cork?
Oh, definitely the goals, I'd say. 1,000,000%.
The reason why Irish people speak English is exactly the same why Jamaicans speak English. Both are considered native English speakers today, and both also have their own unique languages. Here's an example of Jamaican Creole, also called patois.
I don't know what a clock a strike. I plan to do some short films, but you don't know. I'm a man of perfection. Like anything I do, I make sure say, the quality out there. You see me, so I still wait on a few things for you.
Man, respect, man. Oh, I'm here. You show love from long time, for real. I'm done did a vibe with your content then from back then too, you know?
That's
like
the greatest thing. So
yeah.
We are get old and we are grown now.
We are old and me not cut him, but this, we make him know. Him know, this way I do, golden. I have to give you your props to this, you see it?
So we are going to put in something in the farm, you see me? Because we are come from far, and we still have more to go. So you don't know some cucumber this, we have a younger plant here, so. Up there, so. We have something we are run off. Up there, so something we are pick, stage by stage we are doing it in the shade.
In the Jamaican patois, so, like sometimes when they're speaking, they're using our native language, Irish, which is a whole other language. There's certain parts that sound like that. So I don't know whether it's the way that the words are put. That's how we would put our words in the Irish language.
How do you pronounce the name of the
Gaelga.
Gaelga.
Yeah.
Do you speak that language?
Yeah. Well, probably not so much as I did when I was younger, but I learned it in school, and I'd go to Irish college every summer. So you get sent off to an Irish camp for 3 weeks where you're not allowed to speak English. So you somewhat get by.
Well, is nog mee, is maar nog. Maar hem goed aanhouden dat mag het zijn geheen agen, ja zie jou. Zie klaar.
Well, to aanhouden het wel don't say maar squeal me to me as kunde na galje.
Agus mar mai mit den an réige laut níl met kapáile nach der méden is tap se go hinter van an beerde laut. Ach de ráhangegas sin rud an saib sebre gonne wagen. Agus po hart na hans mit de market in Europe en sin. Tagelge, tatanga go tenagen. Agus po hart ni va mortsra sin to me happa.
Ireland has an old Christmas tradition called mumming. It's not something common to see in Ireland today, but in the 18th century, this tradition made its way to Jamaica and influenced the Jamaican tradition known as Jonkanu. Here's some recent footage, both from Ireland and Jamaica. There is a video on my channel about Jonkanu, which gives more details. As I stated in that video, Jonkanu is an authentic Jamaican tradition. It's not African, not European, it's Jamaican. However, because Jonkanu was developed by the people of African descent, it's heavily influenced by African traditions, the movement, the dance, some elements of the costumes. But since those Africans were also in contact with the Irish at that time, they adopted some of the features from the Irish culture as well, like the Irish fife, or a way of playing drums, and also some elements of the costumes. All of it went on to become something distinct with a unique concept and developed into a Jamaican tradition we now know as Jonkanu. There are many place names in Jamaica that are of Irish origin. One of the most obvious examples is Irishtown in Blue Mountains near Kingston. Today, this is a Jamaican community I would advise everyone to visit. The breathtaking views alone are worth the drive. There is also a small cafe owned by a Jamaican family who added a little bit of Irish to remind that you are in Irish Town in Jamaica. Irish Town was one of the earliest settlements of the Irish in Jamaica that goes back to the 17th century, and if you look closely, many early Irish settlements were actually in the hills, and there is a reason why. There were resettlement schemes for the freemen of Irish origin in Barbados, and hundreds of them arrived in Jamaica because under these schemes they were promised up to 20 acres of land in Jamaica on condition that they re-endangered themselves for 2 or 3 years. Those who survived the endanger were indeed allocated lands, but there was a trick to it. At that time, they could only get a plot of land in the interior of the island, where the Maroons lived, who were said to oppose any white inhabitants. Despite that, by 1680s, many Irish freemen had managed to form settlements at the edge of the Maroon lands, and Irish Town is just one of them that survived to our days. However, by 1700s, a lot begins to change for the Irish in Jamaica. In 1678, the majority of these Irish people may have been servants, bonded and free. But by 1729, they had disappeared either by dying, emigrating elsewhere, or becoming smallholders. Some of these obviously lived by farming, but others worked as overseers or as commission agents, selling Irish linen and provisions, expanding into slaves, hoping that their fortunes would eventually rival those they had formerly served.
So how did Irish people turn from the servants into plantation owners? How did that happen?
I think indentured servant, I'm not going to imply that a majority of them went on to become wealthy, but their ability to acquire land at the end of that contract does allow many of them then to become plantation owners. There's a man in Barbados, Cornelius Bryan, who's featured in the museum here, who came over as an indentured servant to Barbados in the 1600s and was tried for mutinous language in the 1650s. And by the time he dies 3 decades later, he owns 22 acres of land and a number of slaves. So you can see that over the course of a quite short period, the tables can turn pretty quickly. You also have, I suppose, wealthier Irish that move over in this period who already have extensive property portfolios here in Ireland and are able to further expand their wealth through acquiring plantations in Jamaica. There's a family by the name of Latouche, which I think are an interesting case in point here. And there's a building actually just down the road that's named after them, Latouche House. And they were a banking family, French Huguenots, and they had Jamaican plantations, which they got compensated for in the 1830s. And very few Irish people know of their links to Jamaica. They owned several hundred slaves, I believe, and they were able to acquire a lot more property here in Ireland on the back of profits of enslaved people in 19th century Jamaica.
During this period, there were also Irish who joined the British military and fought for the colonial government. Others were known to be outlaws. One of them you most likely heard of, the legendary Anne Bonny, an Irish pirate operating in the Caribbean, and one of the few female pirates in recorded history. She was actually captured in Jamaica in Negril in 1720, along with her partner, known as Calico Jack. In the early 18th century, families from Connacht and Munster established a tradition of Irishmen holding the Jamaica's highest legal offices, which opened the way to the easy acquisition of land for plantations, so that all these families emerged as rich slave owners, and some even became the governors of Jamaica. This continued all the way until 1830s, and during the abolition of slavery, it was an Irishman who was appointed as a governor of Jamaica.
The Irish in colonial government, I suppose, are more so described as Anglo-Irish, in that many of them were educated in England and would consider themselves as much English or as Irish, but you have I suppose how Peter Brown would be one of the more important ones. His family owned a very big estate on the west coast of Ireland called Westport House, and he oversaw the abolition of slavery in Jamaica and the establishment of the apprenticeship system. But his own family had plantations in Jamaica too, and his family estate here in Ireland was enlarged on the back of those profits. So yeah, he's a complex figure, and there are differing interpretations of just how progressive his term was as governor.
Sligo is a town and a county in the northwest of Ireland. And in the hills above Spanish Town in Jamaica, there is a small community called Sligoville. This place has a significant historical importance because it was the very first free village in the West Indies. In 1834, when slavery was abolished, people found themselves with nothing and obviously had no money to buy land or property. An English missionary, Reverend James Philippo, bought 25 acres of land at Highgate Estate and subdivided it into small, under 1 acre lots to sell to the newly emancipated people. This is how the concept of free villages developed, and the idea was largely hated by the planters and the then administration, except for the governor of Jamaica who supported the idea. It was the earlier mentioned How Peter Brown. He had the title Marquess of Sligo, and hence the village was renamed after him as Sligoville. The names of the initial settlers of this very first free village can be found in the centre of Sligoville today. By 1840, less than 900 emancipated people became small landowners at free villages. 5 years later, there were over 20,000 people who had land, and by 1865 this number rose to 60,000. Important, the emancipated people were not given any gifts, and they didn't ask for charity. The missionaries gave them loans, and they were paying back those loans for the land. But the fact that it was possible to acquire land gave a start to the Reformation that began happening in Jamaica.
Henry Blake became governor of Jamaica in the late 1880s, and he is known for his New Jamaica campaign, which sought to really attract investment into the country. He was considered progressive enough for his time, but interestingly he also had a very long career in Ireland before moving into colonial government. He was a member of the Royal Irish Constabulary, the British police force, and so you might assume that, you know, he's firmly part of the English establishment in that context, and so he brings that over to Jamaica and, you know, rules along the same lines of logic, but he really moves away, I suppose, from a traditional imperial way of thinking in his governance. He's a strong proponent of agrarian democracy and of selling off government-owned land to small landholders, many of them former slaves, at prices that people could actually afford. He holds an international, or he is pivotal to the holding of an international exhibition in Jamaica as well in the 1890s, which is the first to be held in the Caribbean world. Most of them before would have been in European metropolitan cities like London or Chicago, New York. He was ahead of his time, but he was still complicit in colonialism, so again, another complicated figure.
Of course, these are the examples of the wealthy, influential Irishmen of the time. But just like today, wealthy people are just a tiny minority of our society, and their lifestyle is very different to a lifestyle of an average person. This was even more apparent in the mid-19th century, especially in Jamaica, but also in Ireland. The years following the abolition of slavery in the British Empire, the 1840s, coincided with the beginning of the tragic events in Ireland, which later became known as the Great Famine.
Ireland has a very sad history of a very serious famine that basically shaped and still influences the modern day Ireland.
Yeah, that's right. So in the mid-1840s, a major potato blight hits this country, and so much of the population is nearly exclusively reliant on the potato crop for their diets. And so it has devastating consequences. You know, on the eve of the famine, the population of Ireland was about 8.5 million, and in the decade that follows, you see about 2 million people being lost to emigration. And we have never recovered in terms of the numbers of our population. We are the only country in Europe to have more people at the start of the 19th century than at the end. And particularly in the west coast of Ireland, you see communities, more than 60-70% of people being lost in those famine years.
In 1841, the population of Ireland was 8 million compared to around 15 million in England. Today, the Republic of Ireland has 5 million people, while England is around 56 million. Some of the reasons for such low population numbers in Ireland are the famine and extensive immigration during the years that followed. And this is when we see another wave of Irish migrants to Americas, including to Jamaica. These were the Irish who later introduced potato in Jamaica, and that's why it became known here as Irish potato. Some articles in the internet also claim that during the famine in Ireland, people discovered that they could eat sea moss to survive. But I couldn't actually find a solid proof, like historical records to support this story. The only sources are the websites that sell Irish moss, therefore biased and unreliable. Is it true that some history is not particularly correct and had to be revised and looked through? Is it the case, or most of it is accurate?
In terms of how the British present Irish history? Or...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I'm not quite sure how to answer it. Certainly, the Irish in British discourse were often represented as, barbarous, savage people, and you get iterations of that kind of discourse right into the 1900s. I don't think it's quite as relevant a conversation today. I mean, we talk a lot about Irish stereotypes in this museum, but I think the most pernicious kind of history rewriting that you see now is that, people like the Irish, for example, were particularly oppressed as a colonised people. Certainly the Irish faced a huge amount of discrimination, particularly in the decades after the famine in North America. They were subject to, violence on the part, like there was the Know Nothing movement in the States, which particularly targeted Irish immigrants, and in the UK as well. That's an even more recent story, but that's not to imply that there weren't very many Irish who were very easily absorbed into the mainstream establishment pretty quickly in the places where they moved to.
How do modern Irish people look at this history? Do they try to kind of forget it or pretend it never happened, or live through it, or kind of be proud of their achievements? What is their attitude to this?
Yeah, I think, the story of discrimination against the Irish is probably not a timely story for most young Irish people of today. They move to London and New York and to Sydney, and they don't feel any of the weight of that history. There is still a significant cohort of Irish who will appeal to, a perceived history of Irish oppression for political ends. So, as with all national histories, Irish history is complex and multifaceted, and yes, there was oppression, but the Irish as well were very involved in numerous forms of oppression themselves, and so that all has to be recognised too.
As soon as you try to do research about the link between Ireland and Jamaica, the first thing you find that there is so much misinformation in the internet. And probably the most obvious one is this sign: no Irish, no blacks, no dogs. It became used as the evidence of Irish discrimination in the UK and in the US in the 19th and the 20th century. People claimed that these signs could be found everywhere. So I wanted to show some in this video, and it turned out There are no such signs in either British or Irish archives. This is the only original one that existed, and it emerged only at the end of the 1980s with claims that it was from back then. But it was much reproduced, and people began claiming, like, yeah, I remember seeing those signs back in England. But no, it looks like it's actually fake. Especially that people of African descent were not really referred to as blacks in those days. However, the signs that did exist were these ones. No Irish need apply. And there is a lot of evidence. There's plenty of newspaper ads with all sorts of discrimination against various groups of people. This is just to remind that we've come a long way since then. But oppression and discrimination still exists today in every single human society, in different forms and to a different extent. But that, of course, includes Jamaica and Ireland.
Quite a lot of people are heading to Ireland now in search of better opportunities, while the Irish themselves leave, like other people come here. What is the general kind of public opinion about this?
It's been very mixed. I think many new communities have been warmly welcomed, and you have, for example, the GAA here in Ireland, the Irish football system, which has welcomed a lot of members of these new communities, and it's been really helpful for integration. Sadly, the tide has been turning to some degree in the last few months with the growth in the number of asylum seekers coming to Irish shores. There has been a very small cohort of people who have been very resistant to refugees and asylum seekers being provided accommodation in their communities. I think it's very important for us to remember our own history of emigration and how much we relied on others to support us in times of strife, in times of hunger.
Have you ever experienced any discrimination?
Well, yes, you do, and I don't think you would be able to come across someone who would say to you, I never experienced any form of discrimination. But I would say overall, in general, Irish people are very welcoming. I would say, it's the majority. But, facing discrimination is one thing, but the issue is whether it's what they are doing to address it.
Okay.
That's the important aspect of it. And currently the legislation that they have here is not strong enough. And as we speak, the government is amending legislation, and there is still criticism in terms of the legislation that they are bringing in, whether it's strong enough. But you see, the reality of the situation is that there have to be consequences for your action. And if somebody believes they can do something and they get away with it, then they will always do it. So I think it's more about bringing legislation, not just to punish, but that can also act as a deterrent.
Do you ever get discriminated?
Yeah, rarely, but yeah, nothing significant. Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, but quite rarely.
Sure, I could have just avoided this sensitive subject entirely because it's easier to pretend as if these issues don't exist, but this would be yet another contribution to the problem. I also want to mention the situation in Jamaica. You see, we don't have racism here as such, but we have other issues like classism. And there used to be discrimination of like Rastafari. And if you wonder, how's that even possible? It's a long story for a separate episode. But a relevant one for this video is being a Jamaican of Irish descent. I have to mention it here, especially that I've never seen it being discussed in the media before.
Being a Jamaican of partially European descent, how does it affect your life in Jamaica, or does it affect your life at all?
Well, it hasn't really affected me to any significant degree, in my opinion. However, when I was growing up, I faced a bit of bullying from my peers because, most of my peers were like many shades darker than me, and they had black hair. My hair is a bit lighter. But, I understand that that's the way of children because, I've met a few of them a couple of years later, and that attitude has disappeared. So, it's just children being children. Jamaica is nothing like America. There will be occasions when you might go on the street and, people might call you names like, if they're speaking to you in a respectable manner, they just call you brown man or something like that. But You know, if they want to insult you, they like call you something like red boy or something. It doesn't necessarily always mean something, but sometimes it is. There'll also be instances where some Jamaicans, you know, will ask you what country you're from.
Oh yeah, people think you're a foreigner.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
some people aren't. Well, if I start to speak, like, people will realize that I'm Jamaican, or they'll probably think that my parents is from somewhere else, even if I'm Jamaican.
Oh really?
Right. Some Jamaicans, they will believe that having lighter skin, it affords you some level of privilege. However, in my personal experience, I have not experienced any privilege for being light skinned. Perhaps that was an aspect of pre-modern Jamaica, but you know, things seems to be changing a bit, and I actually agree with that, because I don't think that anybody's life experience should be determined through their physical appearance. You know, so right.
The majority of white Jamaicans are very well off, for the most part.
Okay.
And a lot of that is handed down through generations. Where there are also Jamaicans of white descent that are not well off. How could I better explain this? I work in an industry where it's not a wealthy industry. You know, I don't work in a bank. I don't work in...
But construction is a wealthy industry.
For the owners, not for the workers. The workers
you're
don't
not
get
the
paid.
owner, you're a worker.
I work for a company. I'm an employee.
Okay.
And in generally, the salaries you get paid in Jamaica are half of what you get in the US. However, the cost of living here is roughly the same.
Or more.
Or more. So, you know, it's very hard to get ahead in Jamaica unless you have that family backative and money from generations before. So when I go out looking for a job, back in my father's time, it would have helped him get a job. It doesn't help me to get a job. It doesn't do anything for me.
All right, well, today, right.
You know, it doesn't serve me any purpose. What it does is I will get the white man, you want to take away the money black man I make. No, man. So that is the attitude you run into. And a lot of people don't think about that, you know, that when it comes to race and color, it's a two-way street. It goes both ways.
Today?
Today, yeah. I have Jamaicans tell me I'm not Jamaican. And I ask them why, they told me I'm not black. But I was born here. What do you mean? I'm born here just like you. Black people don't come from Jamaica, they come from Africa.
Are you ever treated as a tourist?
In Montego Bay, every time I come here. Well, I live in Runaway Bay, but even when I go into Ocho Rios and I'm walking on the street in there, everybody assumes, because I'm white, that, well, I'm obviously a tourist. But I think after a while when they hear me speaking and they actually come to realize that I'm actually Jamaican, it changes a little bit.
Tell me about your African side of the family.
Well, you know, growing up, that wasn't really brought up too much in the family. It was kind of swept under the rug. There was conversations between my mom and my dad, you know, going who has more black in them, whether my mom does or my dad. Both of them look extremely white, so it's neither here nor there. But that was something that was always talked about. And then it wasn't until I did my genealogy test, my 23andMe for my DNA, and I started seeing actually how much black I had in me. You know, which it was, I wouldn't say it was a shock to me, but I really didn't realize that I had so many different African cultures, gene-wise, in my system. Congolese, Guinea-Bissau, I mean, literally everything running down from along the whole West African coast that shows up in my DNA. I have relatives that are a lot darker than I am, and then I have relatives that are a lot whiter than I am, light hair, light color eyes. My family is a bit of a melting pot.
Well, you're a typical Jamaican now.
I am.
Because you're a bit mixed.
Said it's out of many one people is a motto. Well, I fit that to a T.
Do you think the motto of Jamaica, out of many one people, represents Jamaica the best?
I think that technically it does represent Jamaica, because technically it is multi-ethnic, but it can seem a bit exaggerated, because like that's not what the average person, like even Jamaicans themselves, like you might think that it's foreigners, but even Jamaicans themselves, like they don't really see that reflected in the population, because like in the inner city areas, there's not a lot of non-black people except like Chinese immigrants that set up wholesales and so forth. People will misconceive the motto because of that. Like in practicality, that's not what they see. So, but in technicality, it is out of many one people.
The Jamaican national motto is Out of Many One People, which is based on multi-ethnic origins of Jamaicans. But these are often viewed in terms of three larger groups: Africans, Europeans, and Asians. The reality is, of course, way more complex than that. Originally, I wanted to make just one documentary to discuss the origins of Jamaicans. I began the research in 2021, and it turned out that there are over 50 ethnic groups. And these are just the ones that played a significant role in Jamaican history. Like the Irish is just one of these 50. And I'm hoping to be able to cover every single one of them. So I'm starting this ambitious project, and hopefully I'll be able to get some assistance from more historians, educators, and just people who represent these different cultures. If such project and the videos is something of interest to you, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, not to miss these documentaries when they come out. And before we continue with the video, I'd like to thank the audience for your amazing support, especially the patrons. If you're wondering who sponsored this documentary, well, big up these people here. And if you wish to join our team to help with the production of future videos, you can do so on Patreon from only $5 a month. Thank you so much. Now back to the main story. In the beginning of the 20th century, nationalist movements begin in many places across the world. This united colonized peoples fighting for their independence, and Ireland became one of the earliest nations to gain independence from the British Empire during this time, and hence became a sort of a beacon to other nations. How did Ireland manage to become independent from Britain much earlier than other former colonies, many of which still recognize British monarchy, whereas Ireland doesn't?
I suppose the movement for independence really takes hold in the 19th century, and what makes arguably the biggest difference is the influence of Irish politicians in Westminster and the Home Rule Party, for example. So there's a concerted effort to actually get legislation on the table and to give the Irish self-government, and that movement then is quickened by a complementary but not always in agreement, more radical, occasionally violent branch of Irish nationalism, which rises up in 1916 in the Easter Rising while Britain is distracted at war. So you have decades of both lobbying at Westminster combined with uprisings in Ireland. I suppose that culminate in this moment where independence is really the only option from the British perspective, and the signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty in 1921 gives Ireland self-government of a kind and introduces partition, so the 6 counties of Northern Ireland become a separate entity from then.
But then the full independence was reached by 1940s.
Yeah.
So do Irish people celebrate independence from 1921 or from 1940s, or how does that work?
I think 1921 would still be considered the point at which Ireland gained independence. We became the Irish Free State at that point. There's a handover ceremony at Dublin Castle when the first leaders of the Irish Free State move in and the old British establishment move out. But yeah, it takes, as I said, more than 2 decades for Ireland to gain independence and fully rid itself of the vestiges of colonial rule.
At the same time, Marcus Garvey became one of the most influential figures in the history of Black liberation movement, which shaped many aspects of modern-day society. He was born in Jamaica, but his teachings went far beyond the Caribbean, from Americas to Europe, Africa, and Asia. He was at the start of Pan-African movement with a goal to unify and connect people of African descent worldwide, and his message is as relevant today as it was in 1920s. It was the time of revolutions, and Marcus Garvey gained inspiration and showed support to other nations struggling for independence, among them India, Egypt, and Ireland.
Garvey lived in London, I believe from 1912 to 1914, and saw close quarters the impact of British colonialism in Ireland in that period. And after the First World War then, obviously, there's a significant growth in nationalism both in the Jamaican and Irish context, and Garvey at the first convention of the UNIA actually reads out a telegram expressing support for the Irish struggle. And I think there are a number of reasons why the Irish nationalist campaign was, particularly relevant to him. I think the strength of the Irish diaspora was possibly one factor. The fact that, you've Irish people spread across the world, not just supporting the cause for Irish independence, but financially contributing to it as well. And I think that is something that, Garvey envisaged as part of his own, I suppose, vision for an independent African republic. The Irish provide, I suppose, a model of sorts in their rhetoric. And also there's a tradition within Irish nationalism of martyrdom. So in 1920 you have a Cork mayor going on hunger strike and dying for his efforts, Terence McSweeney, and Garvey was particularly moved by that and refers to Sweeney and hails Sweeney's courage on a number of occasions. There's a few parallels. So his newspaper, the title of the newspaper is a nod to the Irish World diasporic newspaper set up by Patrick Ford, and there's another famous Garvey line about Africa for Africans at home and abroad, which is a reworking of an Irish diasporic slogan too. And even the UNIA headquarters in Harlem is named Liberty Hall, I believe, after Liberty Hall in Dublin, which is just down the canal from us here.
There is a book called Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, edited by his wife. The political readjustment of the world means this, that every race must find a home. Hence the great cry of Palestine for the Jews, Ireland for the Irish, India for the Indians, and simultaneously black people are raising the cry of Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. Egypt has spoken, Ireland has spoken, Poland has spoken, and Poland is free, Egypt is free, Ireland is also free. Africa is now speaking, and if for 750 years Irishmen found perseverance enough to have carried the cause of freedom on and on until they won, then 400 million black people are prepared to carry on the fight for African liberty. Jamaica became independent in 1962. There are still a lot of laws and cultural aspects that remind of Jamaica's British colonial past. Yet Jamaicans have managed not only to move on from that, but also to build a unique and powerful identity, which now serves as a great example to others around the world. While doing the research, what I notice is that when people mention the link between Ireland and Jamaica, they only focus on the Irish influence in Jamaica, but rarely say anything about Jamaican influence in Ireland. Maybe it's because Jamaican cultural influence has been huge in the world in general when it comes to sports, music, dance, Rastafarian philosophy, and maybe it's difficult to single out how it influences particularly Ireland. But I do want to mention a few examples, like people in sports of Jamaican Irish background. For instance, Clinton Morrison, who's a professional footballer born in England. His father is Jamaican, mother is Irish, and he represented the Republic of Ireland over 30 times at international level. If we talk about music, and specifically Ireland, of course, a famous Irish rock band, U2, was discovered and produced by a Jamaican, Chris Blackwell. He's Jamaican, born in England, but his mother is Jamaican, and he spent a large part of his life in Jamaica. His father was half Irish, apparently. But of course, Chris Blackwell is the founder of Island Records, one of the most successful labels in music history. And it comes from Jamaica. And it's the one that produced Jamaican legend Bob Marley. Of course, I had to mention Chris Blackwell and Island Records here and their influence in Ireland particularly. People of my age would also remember another famous Irish rock band, the Cranberries, which also began with Island Records. These are just a few examples of celebrities, but if we talk about Jamaican culture in general and touch upon reggae and its influence in Ireland, well, a few examples.
What they doing is clear, playing on people's fears. Where you come from, they're going back there. They don't like your type round here. They don't like your type round here. They don't like destiny. Always steer clear of bad mentalities.
Yo Praga crew, let's ride in the Salashin. Ulepin your brewer, na ravla chirasta shin.
It's back, the Irish International Ska and Reggae Festival, celebrating its 10th year this year. Supported by our local businesses and our sustainability partner, Every Can Counts, and the Ball Corporation.
By this time, there might be already people typing a comment. Cultural appropriation, which is particularly interesting to consider in the context of this video, having discussed how much influence Irish culture had in Jamaica, and then seeing Irish people playing reggae because of the Jamaican influence in Ireland. Is any of this culture appropriation? If so, why? If not, why not? There is a band in Ireland that was influenced by Jamaica so much that they developed their own style of music by blending Jamaican and Irish music together. So when I discovered Celtic reggae, I was like, you're serious? Well, I thought it was amazing. Check this out.
Why is man going round in such a hurry? Always fussing and stressing, filling the world with worry.
Welcome, thank you so much for joining us. Can you please introduce yourself?
So I'm Brian Gilligan, born in Northern Ireland. Now I'm living in Spain. At the moment, I'm working as a teacher and a musician.
Okay.
Yeah, pleasure to speak with you, Irina.
How did you come up with this band? I mean, do you have many members of this band? Tell me a little bit more about it.
First band was called Paddy Rasta, which we were 5, sometimes 6 musicians, and we played in Scotland. And so then when I moved from Scotland to Barcelona, I couldn't take the band, and I started this Celtic Reggae Revolution, which I have guests. I have a lot of musicians come and they record in my house. I've had the drummer Ali Salam from Egypt, Tom Roach, an accordion player. Jarlath Henderson has played with. He's a well-known traditional piper from Ireland. We've had Michel Bello, who is a Bolivian piper who specializes in Galician and Irish music and low whistles. I've had fiddlers.
You have international team, like a completely international team. About your latest album, I saw that you have a new album, which is really beautifully called From Ireland to Jamaica.
This particular album is like a dedication for Jamaica, no? For the music, like a dedication to the reggae music from an Irish perspective. All of the songs except one are actually traditional Irish songs, done in a reggae style.
It seems like only yesterday since I sailed from out of Cork. A wanderer from Erin's Isle, I landed in New York.
3 years ago this very day I left the Cove of Cork, and on a ship from Erin's Isle I landed in New York.
Okay, why reggae? I mean, I understand Celtic music. You're from Ireland, but why reggae?
Actually, when I was growing up as a child, I was more interested in reggae than Irish traditional music. So, you know, Northern Ireland, there was a lot of political problems. There was almost like a civil war. So there was one voice coming through when I was a child from a very early age, and that was Bob Marley. There was something about the music that it had like a spiritual aspect, something like a guiding voice, the message in the words. So that took me into reggae. That took me to other bands like Burning Spear, Israel Vibration. When I started listening to reggae, especially Bob Marley, his songs like Know Your Culture, if you know where you're coming from, no, you don't have to ask me, who the hell do I think I am? Well, this knowing your culture, it kind of helped me to get interested in my own Celtic culture. And so it got me interested in Irish music. And when I started listening more and more to Irish music, I could hear those offbeats. I could hear that rhythm, you know? And it was, for me, it was natural to fuse the reggae and the Irish music. That's why reggae. It's a passion. It's something, it's a music that really moves me.
Well, Celtic reggae kind of describes it really well.
It does.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Talking about that, though, do you ever get criticized for culture appropriation?
I haven't personally had that. But my whole view on cultural appropriation is, even if you look at Ireland, I mean, I don't even know where my ancestors came from. They could have been Vikings, they could have been Celts, and even the Celts came to Ireland. So who are the Irish? No? When people take from another culture, it's because they're inspired. No, so it's also a way of saying thank you. For me to play reggae music is also saying thank you for giving us this music.
But back to Jamaican influence in Ireland, there are also many Jamaicans who moved to live in Ireland and are making contribution there, just like the people I interviewed for this video, from the Jamaican diaspora in Ireland. And this chapter, I'd like to mention a Jamaican entertainer and a radio presenter. The man is Zeke, who lived in Ireland from 1980s. He was one of the first Jamaicans in Cork, and he was a DJ on Cork 96 FM. And then in the 90s, he also presented shows on BBC Radio 1. I discovered a video on YouTube from 2014 featuring him and an Irish singer, Cian Finn. I'll want to share a little part with you.
Well, here we are in Freedom, St. Catherine, Jamaica, with a man from Ireland. And in Jamaica, we say Ireland is Ireland. So, Mr. Cian Finn from Galway in the Republic of Ireland, welcome to Jamaica, man. With the man, I am the man. The man is Zeke Booyaka.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey, hey, hey. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Roots in a earring. Hey, rubber dub on the island. Hey, hey, hey. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Roots in a earring. Hey, roots in a earring. Hey, rubber dub on the island.
How the 21st century Irish people view the English, the Scottish and the Welsh people?
I think most Irish people view the British as quite like ourselves. We watch the same TV shows, we read the same kinds of books, we are up to date with each other's news. There is still a section of the population that will make jokes or be potentially a little bit hostile to our British neighbours, and that's been inflamed in the wake of Brexit. The repercussions that has had for Northern Ireland, in a sense that the Irish interest has been overlooked. But I think on a social level, there isn't anywhere near the same level of animosity or tension that there would have been even 50 years ago or so. So there's been a lot of change in that relationship.
I read that Ireland struggled significantly also because of the immigration, because a lot of people were leaving. But recently, Ireland has kind of gained its economic growth and now is becoming the fastest growing economy in Europe. Is this the case?
Yeah, I mean, things really take a turn for the better from the 1960s. When the Irish government move away from a policy of protectionism and foreign investment starts coming in from then, we really enter a new era of optimism under Taoiseach Sean Lemass, who comes in the 60s. And then in more recent years, there's been an influx of US companies in particular, from the tech sector most notably. And so, especially in Dublin, there is a lot of wealth at the moment. There's also a lot of inequality, and there's a hugely inflated housing market, which is partly a result of that growth. But I saw a clip from our state broadcaster filmed in a school in the west of Ireland in the 1950s. The students were asked, how many of you plan to leave this country when you finish here? And nearly all of them put up their hand.
So the immigration is still a thing?
This would have been back in the 1950s. It was assumed that people would need to leave Ireland to have any sort of life and to be able to support themselves. And that is by no means the expectation now.
So people are not leaving Ireland as much as they used to?
I mean, people do leave for economic reasons still. A lot of people leave for social, cultural reasons as well, for an opportunity at adventure, but it's by no means perceived as the only way to make a good life for yourself.
Ireland is actually coming from a far way, you know, up to a couple of years ago, up to the 90s, it was in a similar situation to Jamaica. It just suddenly became a advanced economy, and you know, I appreciate them for overcoming their disparity.
You know, a lot of people don't know that. They think that Ireland is a European country, therefore it's rich.
Exactly.
And has always been rich.
Exactly.
But that's not the case.
Exactly, and that's one of the reasons why they had such a large diaspora. But just like Jamaica, they've had a lot of influence on the world for a small island, right? And they managed to overcome their adversity, and you know.
Do you think, in a way, the economic model that Ireland is using right now, do you think Jamaica can learn from it?
What Ireland did is they turned their economy into a tax haven, right? So that attracted a lot of major corporations like Google and so forth to incorporate in their capital, Dublin. So, you know, if Jamaica can benefit from adopting a similar model, but I don't know, it all depends on the government, and you know, it also depends on the people of Jamaica being receptive to change and so forth.
How are Irish people viewing these changes? Are they happy about all the foreign investments coming into the country, or are they thinking, oh, Ireland is now becoming a sold out, so everybody's buying a piece of Ireland? What kind of narrative do people have now, the Irish people?
I think a lot of people do welcome the arrival of US multinational companies and see it as an opportunity to get ahead and to be able to buy a house and so on. But there has been a noticeable increase in frustration in the last few years over the impact that multinational corporations have had on Dublin in particular. If you go down the road here to Grand Canal Dock, you'll see, you know, a 1 or 2 bed apartment being sold for close to $500,000, and a huge number of people now locked out of the property market, and the only people it's perceived that are able to actually get their foot on the property ladder are employed by one of these multinationals. There is a lot of concern over the very low corporate tax rate that a lot of multinationals pay in this country, and there have been calls for, you know, the major tech companies here to step up and start investing properly in the communities around them. But I think certainly the Irish government really welcome the growth of tech in Dublin, and I think, there's a real mix of opinion.
The standard of living in Jamaica changed drastically as well, especially in the last 20 years. There is a significant drop in poverty from the 1990s, overall growth of economy, improvements to infrastructure, and availability of services and goods that are at a completely new level today than they were even 10 years ago. I have several videos on this channel covering some of the changes, so feel free to check them out.
Do you think the challenges that Jamaica faces are similar to the kind of challenges that Ireland has been facing for quite some time?
Yes, from a business perspective, there are similarities. I mean, we're both small island nations. Having said that, I think we both punch above our weight internationally. There's a saying here in Jamaica, we little but we talawa. And I think that applies equally both to Ireland and Jamaica.
You were given an Order of Distinction, which was issued by the Governor-General of Jamaica in 2015 in recognition of your invaluable contributions to Jamaica's taxation reform program. What was the program? What exactly was happening?
Well, just to give you a little context about that program, in 2013, Jamaica was in a very serious situation fiscally. It had completed a debt exchange and an IMF program that was not completed, and it had no access to the international capital markets. So it had reached out to the IMF again for support in the spring of 2013. And in order to get that financial support, the government had to develop a fiscal and economic program to meet some very stringent conditions to turn Jamaica's finances around. A key part of that was taxation reform. So a committee was established, a collaboration between public and private sector, which was chaired by Dennis Morrison, and I was appointed to act as technical advisor to that committee. And Jamaica then put forward to the IMF its proposals, and there was a lot of negotiation, very robust discussions, etc. And as a result of that, the tax reform was implemented, probably the most significant tax reform in Jamaica's history since independence. Certainly from I came here to Jamaica in 2001, there were new taxes on top of new taxes every year, and it really was stifling the economy. But since that tax reform, there have been no net new taxes for the last eight or 9 years. A key thrust of all of that was to broaden the base of the tax system and lower the tax rates and make the tax regime generally more competitive.
This, as I understand, the taxes were actually lowered, like from somewhere around there, right?
Yes, they were lowered quite a bit. The general tax rate was 33.33%, and it had migrated down to 25%, and also for trade-related companies down to an effective rate of 17.5%. So it was quite significant. Historically, Jamaica's tax system was characterised by high tax rates if you weren't in a number of sectors who got all the incentives, but everybody else kind of bore the burden, and it was seen that that was kind of not allowing those other sectors to grow. So by broadening the base, lowering the rates, and also shifting away from somewhat from direct taxation to indirect taxation, which in a Jamaican context is actually easier to collect. As a result of that, that helped with reform of the tax system, greater tax revenues, and less pressure in terms of having to raise new taxes every year. Prior to the implementation of these reforms, Jamaica's debt to GDP ratio was 147% of GDP, making it one of the most highly indebted countries in the world. As a result of this reform, which was implemented in 2014 under the stewardship of Dr. Peter Phillips, and then in subsequent administrations with finance ministers Mr. Audley Shaw and also Dr. Nigel Clark, who continued to stay the course, Jamaica's debt to GDP ratio has gone down to about 72% of GDP. So it has halved. So it is it's something that all Jamaicans should be very proud of.
Do you think Jamaican economy is really growing now, like compared to, you've been here for quite some time, so if you compare Jamaica now and 20 years ago, do you think it has improved quite a lot?
Jamaica, I think, as an economy is certainly more resilient than it has ever been. I don't think we would have come through COVID the way we had. If COVID had happened 10, 15 years ago, I think the Jamaican economy would be in a much worse situation. I think we're much more financially resilient and in a much better place fiscally. There's still a lot needed to be done in terms of, for everybody on the ground to feel the benefits of what has been achieved. But certainly I think Jamaica has more wiggle room to try to develop and do the things it needs to do, where it was really being crushed under the weight of the debt before that.
Ireland has been very successful in terms of economic model. It was even called a Celtic tiger by some, yes. Do you think Jamaica can sort of learn from that model, and is it a good thing for Jamaica to try and implement similar thing, or not really?
There are a couple of key critical success factors that were important for Ireland achieving what it has achieved. We invested very heavily in education from the early 1970s in Ireland. Also being part of the European Union, it was very helpful in terms of attracting inward investment, particularly from North America, who saw Ireland as a very good gateway into the European Union. We also targeted sectors that made sense, having regard to, we are also a small island economy, very, very similar to Jamaica in that respect. So the challenges that Ireland faces, Jamaica faces as well. We also had a competitive tax regime as well, which helped inward investment. I would not want to say that the Irish model should be just transplanted to the Jamaican model. The fact is that Jamaica has its own unique set of circumstances, and the only solution for Jamaica is a Jamaican model. And I believe the solutions reside herein, not what is to be told to Jamaica from external forces. Having said that, it would not be smart not to learn from both the mistakes as well as the successes of others. I think continued investment in education is critical, and investment in values and attitudes that has been discussed in Jamaica quite a lot over the years, but it's something I think that is very, very important. Ireland scores very highly when it comes to business, governance, anti-corruption, safety, and so on. And I think some of those areas definitely Jamaica does need to work on. I have found Jamaica to be a safe place to live. I've lived here for over 20 years, and I feel quite free to go everywhere and anywhere, and I have been warmly welcomed everywhere I go. So, but having said that, I think we have to make Jamaica, the economy of Jamaica, benefit all Jamaicans. In order, we need to lift up everybody.
What do you like most about living in Ireland?
That there's not a lot of crime. It's pretty quiet. You can raise your family here without worrying. Like everywhere else, you have petty crimes, but very minor ones. It's green, it's fresh. The people are warm, it's nice, the Irish are pretty friendly.
What I like mostly about Ireland is that Ireland is a quiet country. I like peace and quiet. You can be yourself. Dublin is a small city, but I like the country area. As you can see, I live in County Kildare, which is close to Dublin, but it's the country area. And Ireland is a nice country to, raise a family, there's a lot of countryside.
I just think kind of everything about Jamaica is great. So the weather, I'm going to say obviously because I'm coming from Ireland, which is cold and kind of rains all the time. The people, I've made some best friends for life here.
Jamaicans?
Yes, Jamaicans. Being able to, again, go on a holiday on the weekend. So if I go to a beach, that's suddenly the Irish version of a summer holiday. So why do 2 weeks of holidays a year when you can do it every weekend?
Just always a constant smile, for the most part, from what I've experienced. Very upbeat, happy people.
Well, the positivity vibe.
Massive positivity, yeah.
What do you enjoy most about living in Jamaica?
Apart from having a lovely Jamaican wife.
Okay, yeah, go.
Apart from having a lovely Jamaican wife, I would definitely say the people. People would be number one. The Jamaican people are very, very warm and friendly. They remind me a lot of the Irish people, and I think particularly in the country parts, there's such a warmth, and giving, so friendly and so open. Jamaica is very beautiful naturally. I've traveled across the Caribbean to quite a number of the islands over the years, having lived in the Caribbean region, and I don't think there is a more beautiful island than Jamaica. There's a variety of landscapes here. A lot of people are surprised that Jamaica is so mountainous. They don't realize that it's not just all about sand and sea.
What do you miss the most about Jamaica?
Just being able to go outside and pick a fruit. Or
okay.
Yeah, and just like I said, just simple things like walking barefoot on the sand and family and just the whole culture. Yeah.
Do you miss Jamaican people, like the society?
Yes, sometimes, some of the little twang, the little saying, that will cheer you up, yeah. The fact that you can't get a lot of Jamaican stuff here. One thing I don't like, one thing in particular, you see the way in Jamaica you can just go and get your hair done, you don't have to tell them what style suits your face. There's nothing here. Like, I know you have the Irish hairdressers, but so far they're not trained to do our hair. You have the African hairdressers, but they don't treat the hair like the Jamaican hairdresser would treat the hair. They mainly do braiding, but they don't look after the hair per se.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, of
Yes.
course, right,
So,
right.
yeah, if you're doing braids and all those things, you're good. But if you want your hair to be treated and looked after, impossible. You have to do it yourself.
What I miss most about Jamaica, of course you miss the family, but with technology, doing FaceTime, social media, the food.
Oh, the food?
The food.
But can't you cook food here?
Well, you can, but you don't really get the ingredients here. It's really difficult to source Jamaican products here. You do get some products, and you normally have to get the products from the UK. So at the moment, we currently doesn't have a shop, a Jamaican shop here. You know, you do source Jamaican products in other shops, but you don't get everything that you actually need. But again, you know, you making your Jamaican dishes here is obviously, you know, would be much different from you having your real jerk chicken in Jamaica, you know? It's just a different taste. Maybe it's the weather.
What do you miss about Ireland?
Number one certainly would be family and friends. You know, we just came back from a recent trip from Ireland, and it was great to reconnect, and it makes you realize, you know, when you're there and what you do miss being out here. I also miss, as we used to use the term in Ireland, the crack, which is not drugs related. it is often assumed, you know, we use the term ceol conch agus crack as Gaeilge, you know, which is music, talk, and just good fun. That's what it translates as. And there's nothing like that atmosphere in Ireland. I mean, the Irish pub atmosphere and just the nightlife and the entertainment, there's a lot of variety there. But it's just wonderful. And the Irish people, when they just get together, they love to sing, they love to dance. And of course, you know, have a few drinks.
What is it like to be a Jamaican in Ireland?
Well, I think for Jamaicans will always be Jamaicans wherever they are in the world. Irish people are very laid back. Jamaicans are very laid back, and that's something that you can pick up straight away. As a result of that, it's much easier for you to integrate, you know, and get along with others. So, and a lot of Irish people, you know, have this same approach to life. And one of the things in Ireland, if you meet someone on the street and they would say, you know, ask the question where you're from, you say, I'm from Jamaica. And they would normally ask, what brought you here? Because one of the first things they think about Jamaica is that, you know, the weather, lovely country, the rum, Bob Marley and all of that. And, you know, they would wondering, why would you choose a country like Ireland, which it rains almost every day? But of course, we migrate to other countries for more than just the weather, for also economic reasons and opportunities.
What it's like to be Irish in Jamaica?
Jamaicans are so welcoming to, I would think, any foreigner. So they hear you're not from Jamaica and they just want to know where you're from. Just out of curiosity, I guess. Having red hair doesn't help me much because I kind of stick out like a sore thumb, but I have found that Jamaicans in particular have been so welcoming compared to any of the other kind of Caribbean islands to Irish people.
Have you been to other Caribbean islands in general?
Yes, I've been so fortunate that I've been to a good few that I had to travel for work, so I got to see a good few of them.
So do you find Jamaica to be one of the most welcoming places, in your opinion?
If I had one kind of, if I was told that I could live one place, I would choose Jamaica. Maybe it's because I'm Irish that I find the humour and like the kind of personality type of Irish and Jamaicans to be really similar. I think it's just there's a lot of slagging, which a lot of kind of other nationalities wouldn't understand. So it's actually being mean is actually a compliment. So, or like it's just kind of good humour. But so I think that kind of is a good kind of click between the two.
You could have a good crack with them. Yeah.
You could have what?
A good laugh with them.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
How's the mentality like? Does it match the Jamaican mentality? Is it like good you can hang out with Irish people easily?
Very similar. Very similar.
Oh, yeah?
We kind of share the same jokes, you know, we like to have fun, more or less, yeah. So we're quite similar in many ways.
Oh, that's interesting. What
yeah,
would you...
except the Irish drink more than the Jamaicans.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we can have fun without the drink. Yeah, you know.
What I would say to my fellow Irish and the Irish diaspora, I would say I really think you should give an opportunity to come to Jamaica. Jamaica is a wonderful place, a very positive country, and I think, you know, I've heard so many stories as Irish consul from Irish people who've come over here and they've had such a memorable time. And then I'd also say to Jamaicans who may not even consider Ireland as a location, many Jamaicans come back to me because I've, you know, maybe assisted them in the visa process, and they give me their feedback on their trips to Ireland, and they say it's sometimes the most memorable trip they've ever been on. So there is definitely, they do say, yes, there is a kindred spirit with the Irish. So if you're planning a trip sometimes maybe to the UK, hop across and see us in Ireland. There are quite a number of opportunities for Irish businesses to explore in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean, and Jamaica is part of the CARICOM single market, so it actually potentially is a good location to establish as a hub for the entire CARICOM region. For Jamaican businesses, they should also consider Ireland as an opportunity for a gateway into the European Union. In fact, Ireland is now the only English-speaking country in Europe, and because our laws are very similar, coming from a similar concept and principle to that Jamaica, we both inherited them from the British system of laws, common law system. You will find probably that Ireland as a business environment and as a legal environment is maybe more familiar to Jamaican and Caribbean businesses. And so therefore it actually could act as a good gateway, both in terms of the Irish market as well as the European market.
For this episode, I used multiple books and articles, and I'd like to share recommendations in case you wish to go deeper in the history of Jamaica and Ireland. So for the Irish history for general audience, I asked Dr. Healy for recommendations, and these are the 3 books to consider. They cover different periods in Irish history, and I'm going to leave the links in the description so that you would be able to find them in the internet easier. For Jamaican history, I can give recommendations because I've studied Jamaican history for many years now. So my favorites. For general audience, The Story of the Jamaican People, written by the renowned Jamaican historians Philip Sherlock and Hazel Bennett. Absolutely fantastic work on Jamaican history. And the other one is Pieces of the Past, This Told Down Jamaica's Memory Lane by Rebecca Tortella, a Jamaican educator and writer. This book is also in collaboration with the Galena, so it has excellent, historical illustrations, photographs, everything. Absolutely brilliant work. So yeah, all the links for these books and articles are in the description. People who wish to visit Jamaica, my Jamaican friends and I run a small tour company called IRIE. If you wish to see Jamaica, especially off the beaten path, with some professional Jamaican tour guides, please get in touch with us. If you wish to contact me personally though, please don't contact the tour company. Instead, use this email. Thank you so much for watching, and once again I'd like to give special thanks to our guests who dedicated their time for the interviews, and of course special thanks to EPIC, the Irish Immigration Museum in Dublin. Not only they allowed me to film there and didn't charge me anything for it, I just paid entrance fees like any tourist, but also their historian in residence, Dr. Healy, kept providing me with the follow-up support through emails, which is much appreciated. So if you're in Dublin, definitely a place to visit, especially while they have the exhibition, going on with the Irish Caribbean link. And huge thanks to our patrons. There would be no way I could find the time to do such a complicated project as this one, if not for the support of the patrons. So if you wish to support us, please do so on Patreon, and of course share the video so the more people see it, the more episodes we'll be able to produce, and hopefully you have found this one interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.